So thanks all for coming to our latest local Gov Drupal week session. It's great to see you all. This session is called, it's quite a long title, Co-creating Citizen Insight Standards, a collaborative approach to public service data. And we're joined, great to see you, John McMahon, who leads on product at Govmetric. So Govmetric are one of our valued supporting partners. You're here to do the things that we don't do and align with what we're doing and do great work for citizens. So it's great to see you, John. We're just a couple of thank yous before we get started. So thanks first to our event sponsor, Agile Collective. So Agile Collective are a worker-owned agency that designs, builds, supports websites for purpose-driven organisations, including councils. And they've been the lead technical partner for local Gov Drupal since 2020, and they currently hold the developer contract right now. So thank you all if you're in the room. Also to our supporting partners, obviously Govmetric here today, Netcall, and eShot. To our suppliers who put in money every year, it's great to see you all, and to our councils who do the same. We're basically here because of you lot. So thank you. Just a quick thing on Zoom help. You can choose how you view this meeting. I think there's a view link top right. You can ask questions in the chat. Just post them and I'll keep an eye out. And John, if it's something relevant, I might just stop you if that's okay. And we can cover things then and there, or we'll have a big question session at the end. So I will shut up and I will hand you over to our esteemed guest, John. Great to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Will. Hello, everybody. Just a housekeeping thing. Daryl, who's from Edinburgh Council, struggling to join because the council's blocking Zoom currently. So we got to keep our fingers crossed that he actually joins us because he is part of today's session. Otherwise, I'll have to read out his slides on his behalf. But I'm going to go ahead and share some content and then we can get cracking. So I'm hoping that you can see my screen when I press share now. That's probably a lot more information than I expected to be showing there. Excuse me. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen now. Can someone just say yes? Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. So today's session is about citizen experience and data standards. Somewhat of a dry topic at first glance. However, I'm going to convey that this can be a very exciting and quite transformative thing. So the team of people that we have today is myself, John McMahon. I've worked in government. I actually worked for a council a very long time ago. Ironically, that council that I worked for was Edinburgh City Council. Daryl is going to be joining us when Zoom gremlins are sorted by Edinburgh City Council. And Steve, who works in our sales and marketing team, is also here to give me a bit of support should you have any questions that I don't know the answers to. So, public sector services are facing significant challenges. Could data be the key to helping us? Well, something that we saw recently, just in terms of what the challenge is by way of setting the scenes is, like I said, I've worked in public sector software for nearly 20 years. And I know that a lot of the people on here will have worked in public sector software for a similar period of time. And with all of the innovation, all of the amazing technical capabilities and the digital transformation projects and strategies that have taken place, the Financial Times did a piece earlier this year where they showed that public sector or public service satisfaction levels were actually vastly lower than they were in 2002. So for all of the transformation towards digital and digital by default, people actually think services are worse than they were way back then. And that is in services in councils like council housing, waste, and so forth, but also across the wider public sector. And that struck us as pretty informative, to say the least. And councils basically, if you think about all of the great innovation that's happening, one of the things that we see is that being able to actually capture, analyze, and see what people think about services, and even sharing volumes of interactions and what's happening in one system with another is very hard and basically doesn't happen as a consequence. So whilst we know the efficiency generation that a service may have generated, there's not really that much focus put on what do people actually think of the new service and the transformative effect it's having. Well, why does this matter? Well, if you look at the cost of failure demand, it is around £500 million in councils alone. So the actual digital services that people are using are not delivering what people need some of the time. I'm sure that your local Govmetric websites are that's never the case. But basically, failure demand is a hugely costly thing, wherein people are phoning up the council because some digital service didn't deliver what they expected. And this matters as well because if you look at the satisfaction levels and the statistics, and we have done this for the local government and social care ombudsman and the housing ombudsman, we were able to statistically, so some mathematical geekiness, be able to convey that for every 1% that citizen satisfaction went down, complaints went up by 5.5%. So another way to look at that is if your satisfaction of citizens goes down by just 10%, complaints will go up by 54%. So this is in many ways the backdrop to why we think it's important to have these standards that will enable more effective data sharing. And the opportunity is we can create a framework that enables us to have a common way to share data and enable councils to make smarter, better decisions that ultimately enhance service delivery in a more surgical manner that actually delivers results. So what do we mean by citizen experience data? Well, I'm going to walk you through this, and then hopefully if Darryl's here, he's going to talk about how they've actually implemented some of this in practice in Edinburgh. But essentially what we're talking about is demand and interaction data, the voice of the citizen data. So what do people really think? The voice of the employee. So what do your employees think about services that you're delivering? What do employees think about their life in the council? And then behavioral and journey data. And to try and give a little bit of a picture on that, demand data is things like call volumes, the number of digital accounts created, the number of e-forms that were completed successfully. Voice of the citizen data is, well, what do people think about services by channel, by service, by individual transaction type? So what does somebody think about housing, repairs, request a repair could be the individual minutiae of that. Voice of the employee data, staff feedback on processes and employee satisfaction. And behavioral data is things like, well, how do people use your website? How do they go from step A through to step Z? Which journeys do they take? Do they go to the website and then ultimately call you? How can we make a connection between those two things so that you can make better journeys or deliver better journeys? So this is all just a bit of an education so that when we look at the interactive element, you actually know what I'm talking about. And all of this data is held in different systems currently, and we're trying to make it so that it's easy to share data from system to system. So we've structured it into 3 different blocks. So quantitative data, qualitative data, and derived data. And well, what the hell do those things mean? Well, quantitative is simply numerical information. So call volumes, satisfaction ratings, the number of people that said a certain service was good, the number of people that called about missed bins on a given day, that's in the quantitative block. The value of that is it means that you can analyze trends over time, and then you can maybe decide and make better investments on which things you should add more money to, which things you should stop investing in because they're not actually delivering the outcomes you expected. Qualitative is about actually looking at what people say. So the comments, the complaints, the compliments that people give about your services. And it helps you understand specific citizen concerns and segments and cohorts of your communities, what they think of your services in a given way. The final area in terms of data, and by the way, this is just our starter for 10, as you know, this is very much the start of a feedback and canvassing project. The final area is around data that's derived. So we're going to show some real examples of this. So, but the best way to understand this is you might get feedback on 100 different services, and you may want to understand this general sentiment of what people are saying, and maybe some keywords or topics and themes that are coming out of that. Generative AI can automatically do that. It can also do things like make recommendations. So it's analyzed all of your data, and it could say you might want to employ an extra call center agent because there's a massive increase in the number of calls in a given area. Or you may want to really have a look at a certain web page or a certain digital platform function because it's causing a lot of failure demand. And that's basically the three different areas. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the types of data and how the data is structured and what the purpose of the standard is. Now, this is just a quick example of how data that's been derived could manifest itself. I'm not going to labor on this because the slides will get shared, but it's basically an analysis of all of your existing data, the sentiment, and then some recommendations, things that you might want to put focus on, things that you might want to keep an eye on. This basically is trying to help explain the concept of the AI generated data. It's not data that's actually, being derived by a system. It's been looked at and analyzed and worked out by an AI in order to give you more insights that would otherwise take you a lot of manual effort. And just to explain, before, I don't know if Daryl's arrived yet, but to explain in lay terms the value of having these standards is if you're able to push data from your call center, your CRM into your CMS, or to be able to provide a centralized dashboard that contains the data from all of the different locations in an easy way, it means you can make better decisions. It means you can work more efficiently because you're able to actually analyze the journeys that are not working so well, the journeys that are working well in a cross-system manner, rather than just focusing on individual ones. And it also enables you, by virtue of the first two, to be more proactive and not reactive. And the final thing is it's about being able to ensure that you deliver services that people actually want, so that we don't end up with Financial Times charts showing, a plot of woe basically with everything going down when we know that councils are delivering great digital services. So how can we, the purpose of this is to enable we can increase citizen satisfaction and reduce failure demand, which is ultimately about saving money. Now, I'm going to have to pause for breath, primarily because I want to see if there's any questions in the chat. I can see Daryl has just arrived, which is amazing, because that is at the point I'm going to hand over. So, Daryl, it's great to have you on the call. I'm going to hand over to you now. I'm going to click through the slides for you. There's a few there, which, as you know, hopefully you're unmuted. I'm sure Will, being a gracious host, will have done that for you. But yes, if I click forward, hopefully you are there. So how is this done today? So how are people using data that's captured from citizens in order to progress the types of things that we just talked about? Daryl, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure everybody could hear me okay.
We can hear you, bud.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks very much. So yes, at Edinburgh, we've been making quite a few changes over the last few months in the way we analyse the data and the way we use the data. And we've actually just set up a small internal team that focuses on all our areas that are currently using the survey at the moment. Now, what they do, they're able to look through and completely focus on highlighting positive feedback, negative feedback, and handing that over to the direct teams that are responsible for dealing or have dealt with the calls that the surveys are in relation to. So we use it in all kind of different ways. We use it for performance review. We use it for improvements. Myself, I'm part of the improvement team at Edinburgh Council. So we use the customer feedback to make improvements, which I'm sure that if there's anyone else on the call from local authorities, the big thing at the moment is to make savings and make, help with costs. So any improvements that we can take from our citizens that take the time to fill in the survey is starting to make a big difference. And, simple things like changing the way that our IVR works in regards to the contact centre. So a lot of our customers have mentioned that the IVR sometimes puts them around in circles, sometimes sends them in different directions. By getting that feedback direct from the customer or the citizen or the customer, we've been able to make some changes that have received, again, positive feedback on the back of that. So we're using the data that we receive through the surveys from Govmetric to make improvements, to guide performance, to share with our advisors, to share with our managers and counsellors as well now. So it's been a fantastic step forward in what we previously used to try and capture customer feedback.
Super. And Daryl, just in terms of some of those outcomes, you know, like one of the things that when we did an original story with you, you highlighted that, you know, by virtue of the approaches that you'd taken, there was like a 10-fold increase in feedback. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
absolutely. So previously, before we introduced Govmetric into the council, we used to have the only manner of customer feedback was on the back of our calls. So if a customer called in to the contact centre, they could select at the start of the call whether they wanted to take part in a survey. Once the call was concluded, yes or no option. Now, we all know, you know, especially phoning councils and things like that you could be on the call for 15, 20 minutes. At the end of that call, you've perhaps forgotten that you've wanted to take part in a survey. You've forgotten that you've actually selected that option. And at the end of a call, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, we find that customers were just hanging up. And the uptake on that was, you know, less than 1% of our overall calls, which when we actually looked and analysed it, it was pointless. It was meaningless information. Not the information we're getting for the customer, but the sample size we were getting was just, there's nothing we could really do with it. That's when we kind of started looking around to think, right, okay, well, how could we increase the uptake? How could we get our customers involved and engaged with this? And we looked around, and Govmetric was the solution that we were most impressed with. And since February 2023, again, and Steve can confirm, we've seen a massive uptake across all our different channels. We're averaging anywhere between 7 and 10% uptake. Now, to change that from less than 1% month on month has been a fantastic uptake. And we offer multiple channels for our feedback. So the main one being our SMS, which sees the most uptake. We've also introduced our QR codes, which takes citizens straight to the survey if they visit one of our local offices in a face-to-face environment. So that's, you know, a good uptake, and it gives the customer a chance to do that, whether it's on the spot or whether they want to take one of our leaflets home to use to fill in at a later time. And then more recently, we're now looking at the solution to add to our online forms as well. So across all channels, we've seen a massive improvement, a great increase in numbers, which is why, as I've mentioned, we've just recently, recruited 3 people to actually sit and focus on this and provide the feedback to the teams and look at trends and things. So it's been, definitely worthwhile.
That's really fantastic, Daryl. I mean, and I think that really what that conveys is the fact that Edinburgh City Council's taking on, what people are thinking about your services and actually affecting change with them and doing it across multiple channels. The purpose of our citizen experience standard is basically to say people tell you data in lots of different ways.
Yep.
You actually take loads of calls, you get loads of interactions in lots of different ways. And what we want to do through this standard is actually create a common way to enable that data to be shared. So that if I'm in a local GovDrupal website, I could have a dashboard which shows me the feedback across all of my web pages. I can see which web pages are being accessed, which have got the best feedback, which have got the worst feedback, so that I can then proactively decide which services I need to focus on. Daryl, thank you so much for giving us like a bit of an insight into the way that Edinburgh uses it. And I just wanted to say, I mean, very much, Daryl, please give input as we go through the next part of this session, which is, asking about different use cases and how people might use the service, or the standard rather. And the examples that Daryl's walked through, the ones that I have, they are the tip of the iceberg. There are tens of different use cases for why you might want to share data from one system to another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you access to a Miro board. Now, I don't know if you can click on it directly in the slides in Twitter, but if you can't, I've already added it into the chat. So hopefully you should be able to see it in the chat, and you should hopefully end up with a board just like this. And I can see lots of people there. So at least one person has been able to do it. Somebody's moving the purple box around already, which is lovely. So I've given everybody edit access, but this is a Miro board. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off over here. So hopefully you can see this. But effectively, the purpose of the standards is to enable a collaboration between all of the different parties that are interested in creating a standard way to share data between our customer experience data between systems. The purpose of today is just to start the education process and start the collaboration and feedback process. I probably should have just enabled people to add comments. But anyways, what would be great, because today all we're really going to do is try and share this with you and let you provide feedback during and after the call, is if you could grab a sticky note, and you can just copy mine if you like. But if you grab a sticky note by clicking on this here, say who you are and where you're from, that would be fantastic. I don't think that there's enough colors for everybody to be their own color. But yeah, that would be a great place to start, primarily because it gets you familiar with adding sticky notes, which is something that we're going to do more as we go through the rest of it. Now, as people are doing that, I'm going to take a breath and actually see if, oh, there we go. Will's giving good experience. Super, great. And like Will said, if you want to follow me, although everybody's just adding their sticky notes right now, you can click on my little cursor in the top right, and that will jump you directly to where I am. And as a little poll, how many people, if you put it in the chat, how many people have used Miro before? Just whilst we think about whether it's a useful thing to do, or whether it's the right format to do. Add that to the chat whenever you've added your sticky note. Yes to Miro, or no to Miro. Great. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Mark. Great, Shaz. So I can see people are starting to go across. I'm going to trust that people are either being shy or don't want to add themselves as a sticky note for now. Just because I'm conscious to try and get some of this across. Right. So this board or canvas is broken into multiple sections. And first of all, I think that it's always best to give a few examples to help people understand the value of something and why you might want to do it. So what I've done is I've created 5 different use cases and examples of things that you could do if you had data shared from system to system containing customer experience or citizen experience data. So is somebody going to say something there? No, it's feedback, I think. Mural is also good. However, it's more of a faff, I think, for a lot of councils because it gets blocked and things. So hopefully everybody's now looking at my screen. Basically, the things that I'm going to do here is talk about a few examples. The thing that I'm also going to do is, because generative AI has played a huge part in the creation of these mockups, and it's just really to tell you that. So all of the mockups, bar one, have actually been created by Claude. Just for you councils going back, thinking about how you might want to mock up things. Essentially, Claude which is a really cool AI, is able to create mockups that are actually using code. So it's very powerful. So the first one that I did is I wanted to show a CMS like local Govdrupal or Jadu or GOS or whichever it is, and be able to show you might want to have against a web page or against all web pages a rating like 4.1 out of 5 across your whole website. And you might want to have a trend graph. You might want to have the feedback that you've got directly inside your CMS. Then going even further, you might want individual pages. So if we go down to 2, we can see that there's individual pages that have got a scoring or a rating. So that would be useful because then you could sort on those. And you might say, I'm going to focus on all of the pages where the performance or the satisfaction level is lower than a certain threshold. If we go over to here, we can see that this one is about being able to see derived data. So this is the one that I showed briefly in the slides a second ago. This is being able to get a summary. So you've captured all of your feedback, and systems like one of Govmetrics is enabled, uses generative AI to automatically create a summary and make recommendations. That data would then be able to be shared with any other system. So whilst I'm showing it in the context of Govmetric here, there's no reason why that data couldn't be inside a local Govdrupal dashboard or web page for anybody to be able to see, so that you could share that with the executive directors and so forth. The fourth example that I created is like a Power BI style dashboard where you can see the experience, the volumetrics across all of your different channels. And that could be a Power BI dashboard. It could be a dashboard inside your CMS. It could be a dashboard inside any system that is capable of taking data and creating a view like what you can see on screen right now. The final one is slightly nuanced from the CMS topic, but in terms of number 5, it's a CRM provider wants to be able to create a single unified CXM view so that against an individual agent, you would be able to see the satisfaction that they've got, the feedback that they've got, and the levels of call volumes, the average call handling time, the time to wait, all of that presented in a single dashboard. Now, I'm going to shush for a second. I've put some sticky notes at the bottom to provide some further examples because there are literally tens of examples of how and why you might want to present data from one system into another. The only one which there's a couple that I've highlighted in pink and green, so hopefully you can follow me and click on my icon and see where I am right now. So the first one is kind of it's like a bigger use case, which is just imagine Will's team or the local Govdrupal team was asked, it would be great if all of the data from all of the different local Govdrupal councils was able to be centralized into one place so that you can have a centralized hub showing the satisfaction, the performance, the volumetrics across every local Govdrupal site in a single dashboard. This standard is the sort of thing that could make that easily possible, so that best practice sharing of good knowledge. So if in Cumberland satisfaction for waste services is amazing, but it's not in Wokingham, for example, Wokingham could reach out to Cumberland and ask why, what are they doing, how are they doing things better. And then another thing is like an opposite approach to this. Normally we're thinking about the feedback that the council's been given, but it might be useful to be able to know when John phones up the council, John consistently gives poor feedback. So it might tell you that they may not be the most pleasant person when you get the call. It's just an example of the sorts of things that you would be able to do should you have the ability to share this data between systems. So I'm going to pause for a second as we're at the half an hour mark and just see, has anybody got any other ideas? Does anybody want to add any sticky notes for how you might want to use data from one system into another? Or alternatively, which of these use cases that you can see, the 5, do you think would be most valuable to your organization? Maybe that's a better question to start off with. And you're welcome to talk. You're welcome to chat about more than just your use of Miro and Mural. Is everybody just taking it in and trying to be educated?
I wrote the use case that we've talked about, John, before, which is on the
Yeah.
next frame across. So a content designer wants a unified view of data from a lot of different sources in one place rather than having to go and hunt around for it. And I think they want it immediate. They want it when they're making changes to see issues with a page, but they want to kind of review it after a time to say, actually, have you made a difference in the changes that we've made?
Yeah, that is a super one. I think that's the sort of thing that you could have in these sorts of dashboard style views where each of your individual web pages, you can actually see the before and after. Sorry, it's actually this one here, where you can actually see that there's like a chart here mocking up like the performance of a given page. That's, it's like a 5-minute mock-up in Claude to be able to convey that idea that you've got there, Will. So that's great. Anybody else?
Sarah's got her hand up. Sarah, do you want to go on audio or video?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah, we've noticed previously when we've got any sort of survey data back that there's often quite a blur between complaints about a product and complaints about the actual service.
Yeah.
So, for example, if somebody didn't have their bin collected, then they've got no issue with any sort of digital product, or in fact, any, say, a telephony service, they just wanted their bin collected. So then they'll give a bad rating for the root service, and it's quite hard to unpick those two data points. So I just wondered whether.
No, I think that's a great observation, and it's kind of like one of those things where what we see when people give feedback sometimes is they will say, "Great job," in terms of the rating that they give, and then they'll provide some relatively positive feedback, and then they'll have negative feedback about a totally unrelated thing that doesn't relate to the thing that they were originally talking about. Now, the powerful thing of generative AI is it is able to distinguish between those. So in terms of the derived data, which we'll talk about in a bit, or at least you'll be able to go and have a look at it, is the derived data will be able to take an analysis of what the person said. So if they said, poor service, I didn't get my own bin, it would be able to appraise that and actually associate it with the service provision. And so I think that what you've done, Sarah, in a really fantastic way, is actually give me thought to add a sticky note on the qualitative data section, which is how do we ensure that you end up with data that's being shared that is a reflection of the service rather than the digital provisioning. So great question. So what we're saying is how to record the difference between channel of access and unhappiness with a service provision. And I think that what we have in the standard right now is like a different, the ability to record the point in the journey at which it happens. So pre-fulfillment, actually doing the job, and then post-fulfillment. So it's being able to make sure that you can analyze that should have gone into the post-fulfillment thing, not the actual, accessing of the digital service. Does that make sense, Sarah? Or am I talking gibberish?
No, it totally makes sense. I think the timing of asking for the feedback is quite key as well. And also where it's kind of quantitative, the issue there is that if you get a low number, again, we've seen it with things like, say, parking permits, where the issue that somebody has is they've got the permit, but there's no available parking spaces. So they're just generally annoyed with parking in the city.
Yeah.
So it depends when you ask for that feedback of that user.
Can I jump in? We have a solution here at Edinburgh. Is it okay to jump in?
Of course, Daryl. Of course, mate.
So what we do is we have the same issue, Sarah, as you mentioned there. I think the most popular one that relates to us is with our tradesmen. So, our advisors give a fantastic experience on the call, and do everything that's in their power to be able to do. And then, a tradesman doesn't turn up, or, a tradesman turns up on the wrong day, and then the customer's feedback is negative, and then the negative scores against the advisor. What we were able to do early on, and it was a manual procedure at the moment, but when we spoke with Steve, we were able to add in a keyword indicator that allows our coaches to be able to tag on to any of the feedback we receive that's not related to our advisor with a special tag. Back office is the one we use. And then what we're able to do is obviously feed that back to the service. What we also do with our advisors is we ask them to set expectations, so that at the end of each call, we specifically ask our advisor, or tell our advisors, to inform the customer that they will receive a survey, and the survey is relating to the telephone call that they've had today. So we've seen gradually a decline in customers complaining about things that are out with the control of the contact centre and our advisors. So I don't know if that's maybe touching on what you're kind of mentioning there.
Yeah.
But also as well, it allows us to give that negative feedback by highlighting it as a service as opposed to a contact centre. Allows us to provide that negative feedback back to the service to hopefully help improvements down the line with them.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful.
Super. Thank you, Daryl. So what I'm going to do, just because I'm conscious of time, I mean, the expectation was always that we would be able to have a look at some of this and then give the feedback board for you to fill in at your leisure. But just to highlight some of these areas, so the types of data that will be shared, like I said in the slides, is demand data, so the actual call volumes, website pages accessed, the voice of your employees, the feedback, the ratings, the survey data, and then it actually explains with examples what types of quantitative data. And if you zoom right in, you can see the actual schematic for the types of data that will be shared. So organization type will be district council, county council, unitary. Subtype will be Scottish council, Welsh council. Organization name is self-explanatory. Then right into the service areas, and this is using, an aggregation of past standards like the ESD, the local LG Inform standards, to create this common list, basically. So really what we're looking for is for people to look at the standard, look at these areas. Are there sections that are missing that you think should be there as well? One which I know is missing just because we were talking about it earlier. We've got interaction channel, but what we don't currently have in the standard is whether it was mediated or whether the person did it entirely self-service or not. What is the channel? What is the feedback rating if that's what they're doing? I'm not going to go through all of this. Then the qualitative data, so the actual text that they're providing. The types of derived data is comprised of sentiment analysis, so analyzing text, discerning whether the problem is actually about a service rather than the digital thing that they operated it with, recommendations, predictions, and summarizations. So this is about being able, even if there's a system like Govmetric or another system that's collating feedback and volume data, you might want to be able to share that with other systems, even if they don't have cool AI capabilities. And that's basically what the standard is going to enable. So there's several questions here. Which data sets do you see as important? Which data would you like to see additionally? And then which channels do you currently receive interactions through? Now, there's a huge number there, 12 different channels. Are there any channels missing? Are there any organizations that you know would and should be involved with the collation of volumetric data, of data relating to feedback where it would be useful? So I've got all the main CMS providers in there, the digital platform providers, web application providers for the main services, telephony providers, as well as booking providers that are a partner of Local Gov Drupal as well. So I think, to be honest with you, really what we're talking about here at this stage is garnering feedback. I'm conscious that there's a huge amount that I've tried to get across in a very small period of time, which is not conducive to learning and education. At the bottom, you can see that there's the background to this, why we should do it, how it will help councils. And then you can also see this is where we are currently. So we've written a spec, we've shared it with people like Will and another partner. We're canvassing for input today, and that is now officially checked. And we're going to incorporate your feedback and make that Creative Commons style open for everyone to be able to access. So if people want to take citizen insights from our system and put them into Local Gov Drupal, they can do it. If they want to share information from Netcall with Local Gov Drupal and their Dynamics instance or whatever it is, they'll be able to do that. And then once we've done that, we'll convey and garner feedback from central government, and we'll then draft a first version and hopefully get some projects started. I'm going to pause there because I'm conscious I've talked a lot, and I just want to see if there's any questions in the chat or if anybody has any thoughts. Any thoughts beyond what I've talked about today? So,
John, I had a couple of questions. I'll shut up in a second because Shaz has got a hand up, but mine were about next steps, which you've articulated.
Yeah.
So that sort of checkbox stuff is great. Shaz,
okay,
go for it.
super.
Thanks, Will. Hi, John. Thanks for that. I think my only question or feedback is councils questioning drop-off rates on self-serve software forms. So I've noticed you've got Granicus and NEC, things like that. I think one great thing here would be that user journey, trying to self-serve, maybe even getting to the form, but then really interested in those drop-off rates. Why are they coming off those forms? Why are they picking up the phone, or why they're emailing? But even if you take a step back, are they even doing that, or are they just picking up the phone because it's so much easier? That's a lot that comes through with councils in terms of service design and self-serve. So that would be great if you could look at something like that, better than other.
No, that's very much part of what we're hoping to do. So, the fourth category, which is about the behavior and customer journey mapping, that's very much in that space, Shazia. I think that your drop-off rates thing, though, that is currently, I don't think they're for e-forms. So we will definitely add that. That's the reason why this is a hive mind and we're trying to get, input from everybody. We're not going to get and know everything off the cuff. So all of your collective input is really appreciated.
It's a great question.
So I just want, yeah, it's a great question. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up? Because I'm conscious we're at time. Well, I just want to thank Will, Daryl. Thank you very much, Daryl, for joining us today. Will, thank you very much for being kind enough to host us. We will share the Miro board if we haven't already, and watch this space to be able to find out more about the standard. It's been a pleasure to present to you today, so thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Local Gov Drupal week.
Thanks, John. I'll just say a few words before we finish. So
yeah, of course.
We're using this standard we have a Netcall working group, so it's another supporting partner, and we're looking at carrying Netcall call center data into Local Gov Drupal. And these kind of standards, it's one of the projects that John talked about. It's trying to bring this stuff front and center for content designers and make it really useful and usable. So watch this space on that. So thanks, John, for coming. Thanks for a great session. Thank you all for coming in for your great questions. You'll be sent talking about feedback, you'll be sent a feedback link at the end of this. If you want to say, give us a score and leave any comments, that would be great. Thanks to our sponsor, Agile Collective, and to everybody who supports Local Gov Drupal. It's fantastic that you do that. There are more sessions this week. If you go to localgovdrupal/events, I think there are 9 more sessions after this. It's just been a really vibrant and good Local Gov Drupal week. So thank you for signing up, and thanks, John, again for coming. Have a brilliant onward journey. We'll see you again